You're tuned in to Dynamics Talk, hosted by the one and only Dion Taylor.
Hey guys, Dion Taylor here. So back in February, I published this video about the new features that are coming to 2025 Release Wave 1 for Dynamics 365 Customer Service and Contact Center. And in that video, I did a high-level overview of 3 autonomous service agents that are part of that release. Now, the 3 agents that I talked about were the knowledge management agent, the intent agent, and the case management agent. So in this video, I'm going to do a deep dive into that last agent, the case management agent. Let's go ahead and take a look to see how it works and what it does. So what does the case management agent actually do? Now, there's 2 parts to this. So let's start with the most obvious thing that it does, right? So imagine a customer service representative receiving a new chat conversation inside of Dynamics 365 Customer Service. Now, from that moment on, they're juggling a lot, right? They're trying to read and understand the customer's messages. They're searching for the right solutions. They're responding quickly and clearly to the customer. And at the same time, they're trying to document everything by manually creating cases and updating the cases as that conversation continues. Now, that's a lot to handle, right? So now add in the pressure of doing this with multiple chats coming in all at once, each with its unique issues and problems and urgencies. Now, it's not hard to see how overwhelming that can get, right? And fast. So this is exactly where the case management agent can make a real difference, because it's designed to take some of that pressure off by automatically generating a case based on the ongoing live conversation between the customer service rep and the customer. No more scrambling to copy and paste details or switching between windows to create records on the fly or to try to find knowledge articles to help resolve the issue. The case management agent picks up on key information during that conversation, and then it uses that to pre-populate a case, giving agents more time to focus on solving the customer's issues. Now, in my opinion, this is going to be a game changer, right? Especially for customer service teams that are handling high volumes of interactions, right, on a daily basis. But it doesn't stop there. The case management agent can also be configured to update cases that were created using the automatic record creation and update rules in Dynamics 365 Customer Service. So what this means is that a customer can then send an email to a configured support mailbox, and then the system automatically generates a case based on whatever is configured in those automatic record creation rules. Once that case is created, that's when the agent comes in. It's going to update the case using the ongoing email interactions to keep things moving. And if you want to dig a little bit deeper into the setup of those automation rules, I'm actually going to drop a link here as well that you can take a look at that video and the article related to that as well. So let me show you a demo of the case management agent so you can kind of see what it does and how that works. So I'm going to start my chat. This is actually the chat widget that is connected to my Dynamics 365 customer service instance. And I'm going to go ahead and start that chat. And what you'll see in a second, there you go, is that it's going to be picked up by one of my co-pilots that is right tied to this particular chat. So I'm going to go ahead and say, hello, I purchased this Microsoft Surface laptop. It's not right. I have an issue with it, blah, blah, blah. I need this fixed ASAP. And it's saying, I'm sorry, I don't know how to help you with that. And that's because I don't have any knowledge related to this in the system. So she's going to request to speak to a live agent by just entering the word agent in here, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to hop over here to the other screen. And we are now in a customer service workspace app where this conversation, this chat request has now been escalated to a live agent. So I'm going to go ahead and click accept, and you will see that transfer is now happening. As you can see here, the agent is smart enough to understand the problem, right? And because here Maria said what the issue was, so it can immediately generate a case based on that conversation that she had with the agent that is tied to this particular chat, right? Which is my Copilot Omnichannel PVA demo bot. Long name. So you can see here a couple of things that were generated, right? The priority field, the priority is high. She said this needs to be fixed ASAP. So I'm guessing that's where it's looking at. You also see the description is updated here as well, the case title, and there's also a case type. I'm not sure where that's in here, but that apparently has been updated as well. So you can see here that this is going to save a lot of time. Now, the agent might not always immediately have all of the information to generate a case. And that's why it's important to understand that if it doesn't immediately generate a case, it will be able to do that after you end the conversation. So there's going to be another update, right? Well, as you're going through this conversation, once it ends the conversation, if there is not a case associated with this chat yet, right? In this particular case, that's the new case that just got created by the agent. So if there's none selected here, then it's going to see if it can create a new case. If there is one created, then after the conversation ends, it's going to try and update that case if there's any information there. So that's kind of how that works here. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is that if the agent actually changes the value of any of these columns, right? So if I set this priority to actually be normal and we continue on to have that conversation, the agent is not going to now update that column, right? Because I already updated it, the agent updated it, or the customer service rep updated it, so the agent is not going to change that value. That's another thing that's important to understand. All right, so let's go ahead and close this here for a second. There you go. I'm just going to go ahead and close this. And then here you can see that it updated the case from the conversation. So that's kind of what I was talking about. Now, I didn't have anything else to say, so it didn't really update this with a lot, most likely. Now, the second part of the case management agent's functionality is really just as helpful as what we just saw in this demonstration, because it can follow up with customers via email and even suggest to a rep when it might be time to close out a case. So as we all know, customer service reps send out a ton of emails while working through cases, right? And let's be honest, it's not easy to keep track of which email was sent last, right? When it was sent, or whether the customer even replied. Add to that the pressure of remembering when to follow up if the customer doesn't respond. And then you got a lot of potential things falling through the cracks, right? So then there's the question of, when are we closing a case? Maybe the customer replied to say that the issue was resolved and that the solution that the customer service rep gave them worked, but the rep doesn't see that message until a lot later in the day. So in the meantime, that case stays open. The system keeps counting time against the case, which is then going to affect metrics and SLA tracking as well. This is not an ideal scenario, right? So this is also where the case management agent steps in again, right? So if a customer hasn't replied to an email after a certain amount of time, the agent can then generate a follow-up message and then present that message as a suggestion for that customer service rep. I think this is a great and a very smart way to stay on top of communications without having to constantly monitor every single thread, right? So what you're seeing here is that first an email came in from Faith. Let me open up this email. This is the customer, right? And she was complaining because she ordered a few products, they were delivered and they were completely destroyed. And she wants to know if she can get her money back. So Teresa, who is the customer service rep, then responded by saying, I'm sorry this happens. Can you please tell me the name of the items? This will allow me to start the process. So this was the first email that Teresa sent. Then she did not get a response in a particular period of time, right? So that's what happened over here. There was no response from the customer within a certain amount of time. And what happened is that the agent actually generated this draft email, right? So the way that this works is that the agent will keep track of that last email message that was sent by the rep, and then it's going to see whether or not the customer responds. It didn't respond, so it put together this email draft that the customer service rep can then open up, and then they can make some tweaks to it and then send it to the customer. Right? Then again, the agent can monitor that. And if, again, the customer doesn't respond, it's going to continue to do the same thing. And I'm going to show you the configuration for this in a second. So this is what that suggested action looks like, right? So the agent is showing up that suggested action. It's saying, hey, the customer didn't answer any of the previous emails that you've sent. So maybe you want to send the last follow-up email and then just wrap up the case, right? So, and if I want to review that email that it's proposing, I can just click on that button over here, right? And then again, let me just scroll down here. Here is another follow-up about this, right? Could you please provide me with this information? Otherwise, we're going to close the case. So it's really, again, going to track those follow-ups and then provide us with draft emails if needed. The other thing that it will do is that when an email is received, like I said earlier, let's say the customer says like, oh, the article or the steps that you gave me actually worked for me, right? It sends that email. Then we're going to see an insight here that says, hey, the case has been resolved. Do you want to go ahead and resolve that case? I can then go ahead and click on resolve case. And depending on the information in that email, some of that can already be pre-populated for that customer service rep, and then they can very quickly close that case. Okay. So what I do want to mention, first of all, is that this agent is in paid preview today. So you can definitely check this out yourself, but you're going to have to understand that this agent is going to consume Copilot messages every time that it's used. So first, you will need to set up a billing model in your environment for these Microsoft Copilot Studio messages. And today, there's two ways to do that. You can either do prepaid capacity or pay as you go. And let me show you what that looks like. So like I said, you would first have to set up your prepaid or pay as you go capacity. Once you have purchased that or set that up, you can go here to the Power Platform Admin Center. You would go here to licensing and you would go to Copilot Studio. So here you can see the pay as you go messages. I actually set up prepaid capacity over here. So you can see here we purchased 25,000 messages, and then there's a couple of messages assigned and some of them have been consumed. Now, you would first need to go ahead and assign those messages, and you can do that by clicking here on Manage Capacity. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to search for my instance. And then here you can see that I have this environment within capacity. I can also go ahead and assign more. If I try to do this, I think there is a minimum of 500. So you would go and assign to 500. And then you would say, I'm going to, as soon as these 500 messages are consumed, I'm then going to draw from the available capacity in my tenant. And you can do the same thing if you have this pay as you go billing plan. So that would be the first thing that you would do here. And then obviously you want to go ahead and save that. And you're not going to be able to set up and configure the agent until after you've done that. So now let's take a look at the agent's configuration. So you will need to navigate here to the Copilot Service Admin Center. This used to be called Customer Service Admin Center, but you can see that it's actually been renamed to Copilot Service Admin Center. And what you will do first to access that case management configuration settings is you will go here to case settings, and then you should see the case management agent right over here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on manage. And here you can see some of those settings, right? So the first one was the case creation and update with autonomous AI assistance. That's when that case got created and some of those case columns got updated, right, from that conversation. And again, obviously, when you're using the email functionality with those automatic creation rules, it will do the same thing where it will update. It will not create the case because that will be handled by those case creation rules, but it will update the case based on the email information in there. So let's click manage. And the first thing you'll notice here is that we can actually select which channels AI will use to create or update a case, right? So if you select chat, you saw that earlier when I demoed that, right? The conversation is transferred from a chatbot to an agent. A case will be created with AI assistance using fields that you select for AI prediction. So you're probably going to wonder, what if I don't have a chatbot? Well, I actually tested this and the case didn't get created until the conversation was closed, right? So that's the only thing. It's going to not be created during the conversation, but after the conversation, granted, if there is enough information in that chat conversation. Now, this is what I said earlier. If you create some of those cases using those automatic record creation rules, then it's going to update the case using the fields that we select for AI prediction. I do not have that enabled in this environment, but that's also something that you can do here as well. So let's now take a look at the actual fields that will be updated, right? And that's kind of what you see over here. And I'm talking about the case fields, obviously, right? The case columns here. So this is the default list of fields for AI prediction. And you can kind of see here that these are the fields that you want this agent to always try to complete during case creation or update for any channel, right? As you can see, if you make changes to this list and save the page, they will reflect in any existing case update rules. So it's actually going to look at these particular columns here. So the way that this works, right, is you can just go ahead and select the fields that you want this agent to try and populate, right, at the time of case creation. And if you would have some custom fields in here, you would be able to add those as well and have the agent try to populate them as well. Now, again, I believe that when the agent is first trying to generate that case, well, based on that chat, it will only generate a case if it can fill out all of the fields that are selected here. So you might want to be a little bit careful with this, like how many fields you put in there, because if it cannot find all of that information, it's not going to generate that case right at that handover from the chatbot to that live agent. Now, the other thing that we have over here is going to allow you to set up some rules to update that case. You can see here, use update rules to include more fields for AI prediction with specific conditions. Only active rules will be considered in the order that we specify. Once one rule's conditions is met, it's applied and no other rules are considered. So if you have multiple rules here, again, it's going to look through all those rules, right, in the order that you have this set. And once it actually finds a rule that meets the requirements, it's just going to do whatever's in that rule, right? So it's not going to do all of the rules. So it's important to understand that as well. And let me show you what that looks like. So if I click here on create, I can say something about the related entity, maybe about the actual chat itself, the case, right? Whatever I want to do there. You can see here, I can choose from all of these many-to-one relationships from that case perspective. And then I can build out my logic over here. And then I can say, now I want to update some additional fields here as well. So what you're seeing over here is that the fields for AI prediction, the first fields that I selected here, I'm not going to be able to remove them, right? But I am going to be able to add additional columns here if one of my conditions in those rules are actually met. So an example that Microsoft actually has on their Learn site is if a particular column in that case record has been populated, then we want AI to try to update additional columns in that case record. So for example, I can say if the subject of this case is related to delivery, then I want the AI to try to update some additional fields on here, right? So let's see what we have here. What did we say? We said it was delivery. So let's just try to go ahead and update, I don't know, the severity or the serial number, right? So you can do things like that as well, right? And if I do that now, you'll notice here that these columns are now being added to that. And then I can go ahead and name that rule, save that rule, and then again, that will then show up here in my list of rules. Now, if you're not going to configure any of those rules, then the selected columns that we see over here will be updated, and there's not going to be any additional columns that are going to be updated there. All right. Now, before your customer service reps can actually start using this agent to generate those cases, you will need to enable access on the agent experience profile. So let me show you that real quick as well. So I will go here to workspaces, and then here you can see the experience profiles. So here's my custom app profile. And you can see here, Teresa and myself both have this custom app profile assigned to me. So this means that I have access to all of these different things, right? But that's not what we're talking about. We're really talking about those Copilot AI features. And this is where we're going to be able to set up some of those different things, right? So here you can see the autonomous case creation and update from conversations has been enabled. So if you click here and edit, right, this is where you can enable some of those things directly by using this experience profile. All right, so now let's take a look at that second feature, right, that I just showed you, where Teresa was working on that case, and then there were a couple of emails being sent to that client, and the agent automatically created those draft follow-up emails for Teresa. So again, let's go back to the agent. We're going to go to case settings, the case management agents, and we're going to go ahead and click here on manage. Now, there's a couple of different things that we need to do here. So let's start by setting up Well, first of all, turning on this case follow-up and closure automation, right? So all you have to do is just check this box here. But again, there's some other things that you'll need to do here as well. So the first thing I did here is set up a rule. And this is doing a couple of different things here. Now, obviously, you can create multiple rules, right? Which is going to allow you to configure different follow-up configurations for each rule. So for example, here you can see that I have a follow-up rule for high priority cases, right? You can also create a follow-up rule for cases related to a particular product, or however you want to filter that out. But as you can see, you can then put in a filter. This is all related to cases, or they're related tables, right? So you could also say, hey, only cases that belong to customers or accounts, or right, that are like gold level or something like that. I kept it very simple. I'm going to say only look at cases that have been modified the last 30 days that are currently active, because I don't want to create these follow-up messages for cases that have been resolved, right? And then, or canceled. And then my priority needs to be high. So what this is doing is this is filtering out the cases that I want to enable this for, right? So that's the first thing. However, there is something else that we need to do, but we're going to get to that. So in order to actually have a case get triggered, right, for this to actually kick off and for the agent to now go in and monitor those email communications, the agent will need to set the status reason to whatever you have configured this. This is the trigger, right? So if you have any cases that are modified in the last 30 days with a status that is active, with a priority that is high, but the status reason has not been switched to researching, those will not be included. This is literally a trigger exactly that we're familiar with, also with what we see in Power Automate. So your agents will have to change that status reason from whatever it is into the researching status reason on that case. So below the follow-up trigger, you can see the number of follow-ups. And as you can see here, it says the first follow-up is a reply to the customer's last message by the representative awaiting a customer's response. Now, let me explain the scenario that I configured here. So I have 3 number of follow-ups. By the way, I could have picked anything between 1 and 5. And then I also configured wait time between each of those follow-ups. So you can see I can pick between 24 and 96 hours, but I selected 24 hours for all of those. So the scenario here, let me scroll up a little bit, is that a new case was created. So the status of that case is active and the priority of that case is high. And what happened here is that the customer service rep changed the status reason of that case to researching. So now it's going to fall into this bucket by that status reason of researching. So the first thing that the rep did was it actually sent an email to the customer asking for a couple of different things. So what happens then is that is really the first follow-up, right? That first email that was sent to the customer. If the customer does not respond within the 24 hours, the agent will auto-generate a draft email that the customer service will then see as an action, a follow-up action. They can then go ahead, like we saw earlier, they can edit the email, take a look at it, edit it, and then send it to that client, right? So now we've sent 2 emails. So after we sent that second email, again, it's going to wait 24 hours before, again, generating that email draft for us to, again, reach out to that customer, right? So once we've done that, we're now to our final follow-up, where it's not just going to say, hey, send another email message, but now because this is the final follow-up, it's actually going to suggest, hey, maybe we need to go and close that case as well, besides just doing those follow-ups. So that's kind of what that final follow-up means. Now, for that case follow-up and closure functionality to work properly, you're going to have to do something else. You're actually going to have to manually enable all of the related Power Automate flows, and there's actually 3 of them. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So you got to navigate to make.powerautomate.com, and then you're going to go ahead and open the default solution. So I'm going to click here on Solutions. I'm going to search for the default solution. So let's give it a second here while it opens this up. And here we go. And I'm going to enter default. I'm going to open that default solution. And then I'm going to look for cloud flows. Here we go. And then there is, like I said, 3 different ones. The first one is CS Case Closure Agent Flow. Here we go. And you're going to do the same thing with this CS Case Closure Agent Flow, the CS Case Follow-up Agent Flow, and the CS Case Closure Representative Flow. Now, you can see here that the status is off. I can try to open it or turn it on from here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, I'm going to open up the Power Automate flow. I'm going to show you why if I try to just turn this on, this will not happen, right? This will just not happen. I'm going to click here on turn on and I'm going to show you what's going to happen. So it's going to say, I'm unable to start your flow due to connection references missing the actual connection. So that's kind of what you see over here. One of them I've already connected to my Microsoft Dataverse CDS connection, but my Microsoft Copilot Studio one is currently, right, as you can see, there's an issue with that. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. So first of all, what you want to do is you want to copy this name over, right? Because this is the connection reference, MSDYN_ shared Microsoft Copilot Studio. You can also go here to see all, and then you can just go ahead and copy this over. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Then what you can do is you can open up a copy of this page so you can flip back and forth, or you can just go ahead and navigate to that same solution that we were just in, but then we're going to take a look at the connection reference table. So let me go ahead and open that in a separate browser window. So here we are again back in my default solution, and I'm going to look for connection references. And here we are. And I just copied over that MSDON shared Microsoft blah, 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 Copilot Studio one, right? Which is this guy. So what you want to do from here is you're going to click here on the edit button, and then we're going to connect it or link it, as you can see over here, to a connection, because that's the reason that you cannot enable that flow, right? There is no connection linked to it. So if you have an existing one, you can just pick that existing one. If you don't have an existing one, you can just go ahead and generate a new connection directly from within here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. We needed a Microsoft Copilot Studio connection. Copilot Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and create one. And there we are. Let's now navigate back. Here we are again at the connection references. Let's refresh this. And here is that new connection that we just created. I'm going to link that to this connection reference. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Save my changes. And now let's take a look again at that flow. Let's just go ahead and do cloud flows. Search for that same flow again. And you can see now that both of them now have that green check mark. So now we can go ahead and turn on that Power Automate flow. And you need to do this for all of those flows, right? So there's 3 in total. This guy, we also have, like I said earlier, the CS case follow-up agent flow and the CS case closure representative flow. And you can follow the same steps that I just went through earlier to do this. So as you can see, some pretty cool stuff, right? This is definitely going to make the life of those customer service reps a lot easier for sure. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss another video again. Thanks for watching. Until next time.